Welcome back into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, everybody. No pleasantries. Tim May, Andy Backstrom, Spencer Holbrook. He's been here for 40 years. He's been here for a year. I've been here for 5. That's all you need to know. It's the
46 years of coverage.
It's the preseason report. Let's get into it, fellas. Tight end day. I don't know. Not a lot to learn. G. Scott, Joe Royer, the two backups. Cade Stover is the leader, but there's still a little bit to learn, I suppose, about this unit. And Tim, I'm sure you're going to talk about Jelani.
Yeah, well, Jelani Thurman, we didn't get to talk to him, obviously. He's a freshman. I don't know why he's been here for a while. Like what didn't Ryan Day said, he doesn't really think of those guys as freshmen anymore, but except when it comes to interviews. But Jelani Thurman, as you can tell, fellas, there aren't many tight ends. And I think he's going to figure in greatly in this picture as the season goes on. You would have to look at G. Scott probably as the backup right now to Cade Stover, the returning starter and captain, only because Joe Royer's banged up, and we know what happened to Bennett Christian. But to me, what stands out about this group is how few of them there are right now. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need a lot of them, to be honest. You need probably 2, because if you have 2 on the field at once, you're taking a wide receiver or running back off the field. If you have 1 on the field,
I understand the math. I'm just talking about just bodies, you know.
Yeah, but the only thing that can really harm this team as far as the tight ends go is injuries.
Yeah.
And I think.
With that said, Kade Stover says he's never felt better. He is in the best shape of his life.
Yeah.
He can run. He's indefatigable when he runs now. He says he has so much stamina now. He can. I almost said a bad word there. He can mess talk with guys, on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is who's out there right now, who's doing the job. I mean, we saw what happened in the playoff game when he had to leave the game, and then Joe Royer went in. He was a little bit banged up, and they had to rob Peter to pay Paul. Mitch Rossi was around then. But, it's going to be an interesting group to watch.
Well, speaking of Joe Royer, who stepped in that CFP game, he is back healthier right now. He did practice today. Keenan Bailey said that he extended them down the field. He's a really good receiver, right? He was a receiver before transferring into being a tight end, and I think that shows up on the field as well for G. Scott. And Cade Stover now is working on his route running more than he ever has before. He said he's been doing one-on-ones with safeties, which he hadn't done before in previous off seasons, even going up against corners like Denzel Burke. And Keenan Bailey was saying basically if Cade Stover can beat Denzel Burke on a one-on-one in training camp, well, you can beat any linebacker or safety in coverage in the season.
I don't think any Ohio State fans want to hear that, do they?
Well, I mean, right. Other way around, it doesn't sound too great.
I'm not saying you shouldn't say it. I'm just saying, oh my goodness, that was interesting.
Well, I mean, it's just something that he's practicing now, because you have to find a way to make this year worth it in the individual sense along with the team sense, because he did come back rather than going to the NFL, right? And that was a decision to make. And Keenan Bailey said that the idea with this year is to make things uncomfortable for Cade Stover, put him in situations, drills, scenarios like those one-on-ones that he hasn't had before. So not only have the team goals, which we know Cade cares about, beating Michigan, winning a national title, but also improving him as a player.
Yeah, and like you said, running routes, et cetera, creating space for yourself in the middle of the field and stuff. And that's a lot of like what, if he was one-on-one with Denzel Burke, you can still get open by wiles. And I think, we all know he came here as just a wide open athlete, really. Cade Stover did from Lexington, Ohio. Where are you going to play and where's he going to play? Is he going to play defense? Boy, he's got that defensive mentality, doesn't he? But it didn't really work out. And it's really funny because he was a project a couple of years ago, and now he could be, knocking on the door for the Mackey Award and also viability in that first couple of rounds of the NFL draft if this season goes right.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that impressed me about Cade is the way that his teammates talk about him. It's one thing for coaches to rave about his work ethic, but when teammates respond to that, that's why I thought it was so interesting when I asked Joe Royer what's it like to have Cade back in the room for another year. He's known Cade's been coming back since December, since January, but to get his perspective on it now, watching him for another full offseason work, he said it's everything. And I think that's a really key component of this is Cade Stover means everything to this offense. I know that sounds weird with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Trayvon Henderson, with Emeka Ibuka out there, even a guy like Donovan Jackson who has a chance to be an All-American. But like you saw, the offense, not the same form when Cade wasn't out there against Georgia. You can see what happens if he's not out there. You can see what happens if he's not a veteran presence in that locker room and in that tight end room. And to hear Joe Royer say that he does everything. It means everything to have him back. That's some really high praise, and I don't think that should be discounted at all. Cade's going to be a captain again this year. I'm pretty safe in assuming that, and deservedly so. He's got the respect of just about everybody he would
and,
want it from.
And the idea of leaving after last year too, we understand he probably cracked off a couple of what they call transverse processes in his spine when he landed on that turf at the Georgia Dome or wherever, Mercedes-Benz Dome, whatever it's called. And he had a lot of healing to do. And the way he's come back and as tough as he is, we're talking about you, Cade, as he walks by in the background. Just the work he's put in is obvious to everybody.
Yeah, and the way he bales hay is really nice too.
Yeah, the way he throws hay, ladies and gentlemen.
He says
anybody can bale it. You got to throw it.
He says he stacks the best wagon you've ever seen. I think you should go do that hay baling competition. Those two Iowa offensive linemen won a couple weeks with the Iowa State Fair. But aside from all the farm talk, the Kade Stover talk, G. Scott and Joe Royer, they're going to compete for reps. I think maybe it's a little weird to think about it like that just because they're two of the backups. But, like, the two backups are going to compete for reps, Andy. And this is a pretty nice competition that the Buckeyes have developing right behind Cade Stover to be the second guy in line. And if something were to happen to Cade Stover, you'd be the next man up. Joe Royer was that last year in the Peach Bowl with G banged up. Those guys are going to have a big role here.
Yeah, and Keenan Bailey talked about it. Last year Cade probably played too many snaps. He was averaging around 58 snaps per game. Towards the end of the season, playing north of 65, close to 70 snaps per game. And for a tight end, at least in Keenan Bailey's eyes, that's too many snaps. You want to have Cade at his best toward the end of the season. So they're talking about finding ways to, keep him fresh and make sure that he is at his best when Michigan rolls around, when hopefully for Ohio State the college football playoff rolls around. So who does that bring up, right? Joe Royer, G. Scott, maybe Jelani Thurman down the road. It seems like he has a lot of development he still needs to do as a blocker, both in pass protection and in run blocking. So is that a situation where towards the end of the year he's more in play for that role? I don't know. It's something to think about.
Jelani Thurman down the middle. Jelani Thurman's going to be a matchup nightmare when they get into the season. And we'll see. Like you said, you want him to be able to do all things that a tight end should do, but I guarantee he's in their plans, man. Like we said, he lost his black stripe early in spring. Of course, that might have been because they already knew Bennett Christian was going to miss the year too, but they have hastened his development, and there are going to be ways they can get him in the game, I think, sooner rather than later. I'm really looking forward to see how that develops.
Yeah, I think the top three are already settled. I do think there is a little bit of a gap between those top three and Jelani, just based on experience and time with Mick Marotti in the weight room and on field, what you've done, through your body of work through the career. Cade Stover, G. Scott, and Joe Royer, I think, are going to be the top guys. Whether Jelani can get into that, I think, depends on how he prepares for games. I don't think it's anything about physical anymore, but you talk to some of these guys in the building, a game week is just different, even more so than training camp. Training camp, you have to take care of your mind, your body, everything. But a game week is just completely different. And if he goes in and focuses up and is able to prepare really well for Indiana and prepare really well for Youngstown State and Western Kentucky and even the minute details against the worst opponents on this schedule, I think by the time that bye week rolls around September 30th into October, you could see Jelani get on the field. I don't know if that's going to happen those first 4 weeks, though, because not only, again, do you have to prove it in spring camp and in training camp, you have to show that you know what it takes to prepare at Ohio State.
I'm going to stay on that bandwagon, though. I'm going to stay on that bandwagon.
No, I think rightfully so.
I think he can contribute to a team that can make a run here, and like you're saying, may come later in the year. I think they get him in sooner than you think, but that's just the way I'm thinking. Because, like you just said, call them what you want. They're non-conference games, developmental games where you can, as we've seen them, put guys in, and this schedule's almost tailor-made for them to bring him along in that regard.
You can make the argument, though, it's almost more powerful to have a weapon like that people don't know about towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Right? If he's ready,
believe me, when they come off the bus, people will see him. It's kind of like a basketball team. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
But there's some gamesmanship, right? Because we've seen guys at Ohio State not make their true impact until the postseason or a few weeks before that. And maybe there's something to be said about hiding him a little bit.
No hurry.
And then bring him in when he's fully ready, and then they don't have film on him. They don't know how to guard him. And then when it matters most, maybe you use him in those goal line situations.
Yeah, and even if you do know how to guard him, he's 6 foot what?
Six, yeah.
And 258 pounds or whatever. Like we were talking about Cade Stover creating space around Denzel Burke. This guy is a mismatch. Jelani Thurman's going to be a mismatch for defenses, and that I know they know it. I know they're scheming it. So we'll see where they go. Guys, I've got to bail here unless we're almost done.
No, Tim, by all means.
Talk to Mick Marotti. What else do we need to talk about?
We're just going to talk about Keenan Bailey a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
You mind? Hey, it's always a pleasure. You know that, right? And ladies and gentlemen, keep watching, especially these two guys. It'll be I shouldn't say that.
Back to tight end talk, Andy. It's interesting to me. Keenan Bailey, a new father, so I think that is worth congratulating him on camera, even though that's been known for a while. He's a new dad. He's pushing I thought it was awesome that he was pushing the stroller into the team hotel there for camp check-in. Talked a little bit about balancing that life now as a new dad and as a tight ends coach now, and a lot of new in his life. And man, this is a guy who is just excited to be the tight ends coach at Ohio State. And I think there's something to be said about that. He really embraces his role. Even had the custom Ohio State sweatshirt on at camp check-in that had the TE and the back TE in Ohio State in a different color to really point out, like, hey, this is the tight ends. Like, I love his enthusiasm. It makes me want to talk to him more than we really get the chance to.
Yeah, he said his kid Miller is going to be a future tight end, maybe here, but. He's a balance in that way with having a kid. Being a coach during training camp is almost impossible. It's really just when he gets home late at night, he takes over when the baby's crying. That's a tough position to be in, taking over as a position coach your first year, getting a promotion. He loves to be in this building, trying to balance all of that, but the guys clearly love him in that room. And not only in that room, but the offensive linemen, the wide receivers that worked with him the past couple of years. Even before he got promoted, guys talked glowingly about Keenan Bailey. So I'm really interested to see how this first year goes within that room, especially if there are injuries and then it becomes a roster management situation. Who is he putting in? How is he managing that? That'll be interesting because, as Tim mentioned earlier in the show, there aren't that many tight ends on this roster.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year for these Ohio State tight ends. Cade Stover leads the way, and that's not really a question. G. Scott and Joe Royer, second in line, that's not really a question. Who it is, though, is a big question. And then Jelani Thurman is the wild card, I think. Safe to call him that you just don't really know how they're going to use him. But anyway, the Buckeyes have a lot of talent in this room, and I think it's going to be a good year for these tight ends as long as the progression continues. Cade Stover can't be 2022 Cade Stover. He was good, but as he got banged up throughout the year, there were some moments where you wish you had a little bit more. Joe Royer just had a terrible year in so many ways, not on the field at all. Nothing on the field with the injury and family issues and the loss of his mother. Like, just not something that any college football player should have to go through. But he's on the other side of that, and he said that he feels pretty good about where he's at. And then G. Scott feels like he's got his mind right, his body right, and his soul right, which always interesting to hear when some of these guys talk about the body and the soul and how they connect. And I don't know, there's just a positive mojo about this tight end unit that I think they're going to have a pretty good year.
It's a good thing for Ohio State because if you want to use 12 personnel, which Brian Hartline said he likes, this offense has used that in the past. You don't have a Mitch Rossi anymore. So now if you're going to have two tight ends on the field at the same time, you've only got four we're really talking about in this conversation. One injury and suddenly you're scratching your head a little bit. So all these guys are important. Even Jelani, maybe even a Sam Hart. I mean, he's not brought up in these conversations, but one injury and suddenly a guy we're not talking about is more important. Bennett Christian not being available now seems maybe a little bit more important in that equation. So they all got to be on their A game this year.
So different era of Ohio State tight end play with Kevin Wilson, the offensive coordinator, now at Tulsa as the head coach. That when we talk to tight ends, we're really just talking tight ends now. Keenan Bailey took the podium, so did the tight ends at Ohio State. That's tight end talk, and we didn't even ask the question, will Ohio State utilize the tight end in the passing game this year? It's a glorious occasion, folks. Now that we know they did it last year, we don't have to ask that question this year. The 40-year vet Tim May was here. He's no longer here. He's back there doing some interviews for the next Tim May podcast. Make sure to check out the Tim May Show, my bad. That's Andy Backstrom, though. I'm Spencer Holbrook with just 6 years of combined coverage, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. If you agree, go to the Lettermen Lounge message board. Check us out there. Pretty good deals running right now at lettermenrow.com. Get in on all the action where we cover the Buckeyes 365 days a year. We'll see you at lettermenrow.com, and we'll see you back in this building tomorrow for more coverage of the Buckeyes.